Just a few last thoughts for this week about experimental design and some ethics. As we know, statistics is a scientific field of study, and so there is going to be experiment, the word experiment, and some of the definitions that go along with that experiment design. We know that we have to do things within proper scientific method in order for them to be valid. So we can talk about experiments, and there's some things listed. Does aspirin reduce the risk of heart attacks? Is one brand of fertilizer more effective? Proper study design is the way that we make sure that our data is accurate, and therefore the results will be something that is worth looking at. There's a few words here that we need to talk about. When we talk in algebra terms, x and y, they affect each other, right? A change in x makes a change in y, and so we have our input and our output. Same thing with an experiment. We call the first variable our explanatory variable, and then what happens to that is the response variable. So again, it's that same idea of our input and output, something that is happening that is causing something to happen. So we have those two words to define and make sure. Maybe because I kind of like math, I think of things wanting to make sure that that somehow hinges on some prior knowledge. I use the x and the y from linear equations. There's also treatments and an experimental unit that are defined in the paragraph in front of you. And these, the different values of the explanatory variable are called the treatments, because we can, let's try this. Well, what if we do this to this experimental variable? What if we, add a feature? What if we take away a feature? And then we are measuring each object to see what has happened to it. So those are some definitions in our experiments. And here is an example, a paragraph about some researchers. Sample, they talked to 400 men and had them participate in a study, and they divided them into two groups, taking aspirin and a placebo. And we are just, although that case study might be interesting, what we are doing in this particular example is just to say, can we use some of that vocabulary that we've just learned? And we talk about the population. Okay, those are the men aged 50 to 84. The sample is those 400 men that actually participated in the study. The experimental units are the individual men in the study, and the explanatory variable is the medication. That's what's going to change. The treatments were aspirin for some and placebo for some others, and the response variable is whether the subject had a heart attack. So although those are kind of harsh to see written, those are how those vocabulary words are used, and I think that's a pretty helpful explanation where it kind of pulls it together, so we can see how we can really use those as we talk. If you are interested in experimental design, this link does go to a video more about experimental design and how they are set up so that the data is accurate, but more than accurate, so that it is helpful. There's always, every statistics class has to have a little piece of ethics, right? Because statistics can be used unethically. And so there's a little section in your book that you might want to look at about the ethics. You probably all have seen skewed data in research, often around elections. Sometimes it's in the way the bar graphs are even drawn, to where one is talking about millions and one's talking about thousands, and they put them next to each other. And to show sometimes the thousands ones is even higher because it's 4,000 compared to 3 million. But if you read the fine print, you can see that it is misleading. So I'm sure that you have examples that you have seen of misleading data, and that is what the ethics is talking about. We try to make sure that statistics are handled ethically, and this example just reminds us of that. It is an example so that you can see how things work and protections that are mandated by law, and how to keep privacy for individuals that we are collecting data on. And that's the end of this week's instruction. Check out your book, check out the problems there, and then go ahead and submit your assignment and your quiz, and don't forget to keep up on the discussion board, and I will see you next week. Email me with any questions you might have. Thanks.